Portal is one of those games that at first glance it seems like a boss battle was only included in this game as a sense of finality. It's really not a game meant for standard enemy encounters. At its core, it's a puzzle game where you're trying to manipulate your surroundings and your own movement to reach the goal. And it's amazing. Some clever but easy to understand mechanics mixed with insanely creative level design makes it one of my favorite gaming duologies. And while I don't think it should be the focus for a game like this, it is interesting when the developers try and work these elements into a boss battle. In the original game, we had Glados, which was a wonderfully crazy boss battle in itself and perfectly finished off the game. Knowing the impact both Glados and her fight had on the gaming community, it made sense to see how they would top it in the sequel. And, well, Valve gave us that answer in Portal 2. I don't talk enough about it, but I love this game. It's probably my favorite Valve game, and turns everything that made Portal 1 great up to 11. More puzzles, more mechanics, more of a crazy story, and at the end of it all is the final face-off with Wheatley. Your companion turned rogue, who after studying your fight with Glados, he has devised a 4-part plan to stop you. And you have to tackle his bombs, a lack of initial surfaces to Portal, a ticking time limit of neurotoxin. But once you are able to trick him into making some surfaces portable, then your temporary ally Glados drops in some corrupted personality cores for you to attach and weaken the AI. The whole fight is hilariously insane, and I love it. You have to cleverly use Wheatley's plans against him while dismantling his core AI, using nearly everything you've used up until now, and it only gets crazier with more cores added. Eventually enough corrupt cores are added and you need to press the stalemate button to swap Wheatley in for Glados. But he's rigged the button, knocking you to the ground, with no way of swapping Wheatley out now. With you lying face up, the room's crumbling around you, and suddenly the first glimpse of the outside world appears through the roof, and the moon is seen in the distance. I will never forget the first moment I played this boss battle. My exact thoughts, wouldn't it be funny if... The portal connects and you and Wheatley are both sucked into the vacuum of space with the core being flung and Glados pulling you back in. It's incredible. From beginning to end, this whole boss fight is hard to gush about enough. I haven't even talked about the music for both 4-part plan during the battle and Want You Gone as the credits music afterward. Simply sublime, and because of everything I just talked about, this fight is probably the first thing I think of when one of my favorite games, Portal 2, is mentioned. Man, I love Nier. Thanks to the Replicant remake coming out earlier this year, I can finally play the original game. I'm a bit on the fence as to which game I like overall more. Probably still Automata, but it's damn close. But in terms of boss battles specifically, I think the original Nier takes the cake. But which one to choose? There's so many memorable ones. The Knave of Hearts, Hook, Wendy, the fucking Shadow Lord. But I think I'm gonna go with a choice that might seem a little bit out there, especially considering it's a recent addition to the Nier Compendium. In the recently released Nier Replicant remake, there is an extra chapter in between Act 2's Airy and Facade visits. After returning from the absolutely devastating boss battle with Wendy, an honorable mention if anything else, you might notice that the iconic red-bagged ferryman is mysteriously absent, already a bit off-putting if you are used to the original Nier. Popolo specifically calls the disappearance out and asks you to look into it. A new chapter? Interesting. After some investigation, you learn that the ferryman, along with some other residents of Seafront, have gone missing. Your search brings you to the mysterious shipwreck, already a bit off-putting to fans of Nier 1, which wasn't there in that game. When searching the vessel, the ambience is foreboding. Learning that the ship was originally a slave vessel, and you start to see an apparition just out of sight, with numerous macabre images throughout, it sets the creepy tone perfectly. And then, suddenly, you fall through the floorboards, and there's darkness, until you find your lantern. And when the lights return, a gruesome sight. The people you were sent to search for, murdered and stashed in the hold. Finally, you arrive at the location of the source, a lonely girl who has relapsed to become a massive shade, potentially the largest in the game. After that incredible setup, you are treated to a multi-phase fight, dismantling the enormous creature, who I think personally has an amazing design. Eventually, the ship itself is destroyed, but the massive creature has grown to sizes out of control. You're put in a state where you need to try and finish it off before it can lay one final strike. I didn't think I liked this trope that much, dang. I love how this isn't a forced failure. If you succeed in weakening her, you are treated to a speedier battle as you climb across the wrapping vines to deliver a final blow. If you fail though, Kaine takes a passing postman hostage as you take advantage of the creature's apparent distraction to finish her off. Either way, you are treated to a touching, impactful scene as she gives into her wounds and passes on. But wait. In true Nier fashion, on subsequent playthroughs, you learn more about the boss's backstory, how she was discovered by that postman earlier, who named her Louise and looked after her, treating her with a kindness never before experienced by her. She believed by killing enough humans, she could return to a human state herself. It's also, I believe, the only fight outside the Shadow Lord that gives even more detail on ending C and D as well. This boss fight is just excellent, and a mastercraft of what the Nier boss battles set out to do. It's so fleshed out, with a perfectly foreboding setup, and a satisfying fight in itself. Plus, an emotional aftermath. It's a great time to be a Nier fan, and I'm looking forward to where this wild journey brings us next. Aw, I can only choose one Metal Gear Rising boss. Fine. But which to pick? Monsoon, Armstrong, Mr. Motherfucking Jetstream Sam? Nah, it was hard, but I'm gonna pick a classic. Raiden's old arch-nemesis, the Metal Gear Ray. An insane spectacle of a fight against a huge mecha that puts what you know about MGR's combat to its limit, facing down the odds in a doomed part of an urban city with one of gaming's most iconic tunes in the background. All that sounds perfect for a final boss of the game, right? Well, it would be. If this wasn't the first boss of the game! It's such a great showcase of this game's mechanics and serves as an incredible pseudo-tutorial, starting with slashing up the base of the beast and any missiles it launches to catch you off guard. When you get the chance, you can leap and enter blade mode to slice up the appendages of the Metal Gear, and it just feels so satisfying. You keep taking it down piece by piece until finally a QuickTime event appears where you enter into a sword struggle with its tail blade versus your katana. You win, daze the mecha enough to grab it by the sword, chuck it, leap 100 feet to the sword, run along the sword, slashing the whole way, then with one leap cleaving the tail of the beast, finishing it off. But oh, wait a minute, it's still not dead. It remains functional with just the torso and wings, launching a barrage of missiles that you have to use blade mode to slash up as you take care of the remaining turrets, knocking it down to the ground. In a desperate retreat, it dashes back and provides some missile cover to escape for a later battle. Or that's what it would do if you then didn't run across the missile barrage through the collapsing debris in order to reach the core paneling and strip the Metal Gear of its wings. And we're still not done. The stubborn mecha tosses Raiden with its jaw into a clock tower, forcing Raiden to run down the clock tower, dodging lasers to reach Ray, riding along the spine to completely gut it, and finally finishing it off. This was the frickin' tutorial! Needless to say, this boss is something. It's a thrill ride from beginning to end, and I love every second of it. And I didn't even mention the music. Rules of Nature, which is such a memey song at this point, but I don't care. It's so good, and I'm playing as one of my favorite characters, Raiden. God, it's really good, man. I was really considering putting Sam instead on this list because I think it has more emotional weight and impact, but I had to put on Metal Gear Ray just for how well it instantly sold me on the combat, the style, the character, and this incredible game as a whole. One game from recent memory that's taken the world by storm for being an absolutely entertaining boss rush is Cuphead. There's not a lot I can say that hasn't already been said for this game. I love it. I think it looks gorgeous, sounds gorgeous, and plays gorgeously. And while there are run and gun sections, this game is almost entirely a gauntlet of some of the most creative bosses I've ever seen. Each one so much fun to learn the ins and outs and get ever closer to victory. Sure, it's very challenging, but it's never frustrating. It's easy to just get sucked into a session of attempts to beat the same boss over and over and never get bored. But which one is my favorite? Well, it was hard to choose just one, so let's not. Well, sort of. My favorite Cuphead boss is easily King Dice, the head honcho of the casino where Cuphead made his sour deal in the first place. Sure, the devil is the overall villain and final boss of the game, but for me the big bass for Cuphead has always been King Dice. You see him throughout your journey. I think Wayne Brady's portrayal in the animated series is looking great, and he has probably the longest, most ambitious, and most satisfying fight in all of Cuphead. You start in front of a game board of sorts, where you time the roll of a dice, which you have a fair amount of control of in terms of how the dice lands. With that roll, you move across the board. Now, see those number spaces? Each one is a different casino-themed mini-boss that you'll have to fight, and while they are weaker in terms of HP than normal bosses, they are no less creative or gorgeously animated. From sentient drinks to a rabbit and a magic hat to a hostile roulette table, the ambition to put 9 potential fights within this one boss is incredible to me, and it involves a lot of strategy. You have to fight at least 3 of these bosses, 1 per triplet, but because of the controllable dice roll, it's really up to you as to which boss fights to take on. And there's really no objective answer. It adds a whole new dimension to the adaptations required to play this game. It's no longer just a matter of playing to master a boss's strategy and pattern, but playing enough to be aware of which bosses you personally struggle with or find easy, so you're in the best shape for the end of the gauntlet. That's right, the end, because once you reach the end of the board, King Dice finally enters the fray with his own attack. Sure, it's just one pattern, but it still doesn't feel like a pushover, especially after what you just went through. This boss feels like a perfect culmination of what Cuphead has been building up to, and not only that, a perfect payoff for King Dice. Of course he has a bunch of baddies under his control, he's the kingpin of the casino! And it's also definitely the most dynamic in the game in terms of ways you can beat it. When you have a payoff this good to a boss rush game that was already fantastic, you must be doing something very, very right. Devil May Cry certainly isn't lacking in entertaining, larger-than-life spectacle encounters, but as I said in my honorable mention with Credo, DMC bosses are most enjoyable for me when they are one-on-one duels with a fighter canonically similar in power to you. A sword-swinging, gun-slinging clash of skills. And throughout the franchise, the easy standout in that category has always been DMC3's Virgil battles. In particular, the final boss iteration of the PS2 classic. An emotional duel taking place on the border between Hell and the surface world. A moody orchestral score sets the scene for a challenging fight between Dante and his brother that tests your abilities and instantly became a gaming classic. It's an amazing fight that easily makes this list. If this list was made 3 or so years ago, because if there's one person who could possibly make the attempt to top Virgil, it's, well, Virgil. What all of Devil May Cry 5 was building up to, the resurrection of Virgil, and another showdown between the Demon Brothers. Everything that made the final fight in DMC3 great is on display here. Wonderful set piece, with awesome music, great story built up, and a match between overpowered equals. Even more so now with the increased Sin Devil trigger forms, and more attacks in general. But what truly elevates this fight beyond its predecessor is the second phase. I know they are literally 2 chapters, but it feels like a continuous boss fight. It's only separated by one of the best cutscenes in the game, which in my eyes only strengthens the fight, so... When Nero comes in, new incredible Devil Trigger form in hand, and the boss begins, and it's amazing. The starting violin, reminiscent of DMC3's boss theme, clearly Virgil showing his control. And then that's instantly tossed aside with Nero using his Devil Trigger for the first time, turning the song into an incredible remix of Devil Trigger, Silver Bullet. And what follows is one of the most satisfying battles in the franchise. An emotionally charged father and son bout while controlling one of my favorite hack-and-slash characters of all time. Taking on Virgil, using Nero's new unique moves is incredible every time I reach this part of the game. A masterpiece of a final act for this incredible experience. It would be a crime not to put a No More Heroes boss on this list. So many crazy encounters with unique and memorable boss battles. They are easily the highlights of the series, and Suda51 doesn't pull any punches. Amazing music and style, and each one often has a surprisingly fleshed out backstory that we only scratch the surface of in their battle proper. I think anyone who has played the No More Heroes series would put a boss from it on a list like this were they to make one, but I also think that entry might be different for everyone. While there are plenty of standout fights in the series for me, there was a clear winner. Rank 4 in No More Heroes 2, Margaret Moonlight. The level begins with the longest gauntlet of enemies in the game, at least in one single area. This long fight, plus the climb throughout the abandoned supermarket after, has caused dusk to turn into nightfall, until Travis finally reaches the rooftop and on the billboard, Margaret is waiting, whistling her theme and giving a coy introduction before the fight begins, and it is amazing. Margaret wields twin scythes that also serve as high-impact sniper rifles.
What?
It's also a gun.
Oh.
And uses both physical and ranged attacks to try and get the edge on you, and it is insanely fun bobbing and weaving to try and sneak hits in. Eventually, she'll retreat and take to her outpost where the sniper functionality is put to good use. Take cover or it can easily end you. For me, it's personally the most fun fight in the game, even if it's a bit straightforward. But that's just the gameplay. I adore the presentation of this fight. I love Margaret and her Gothic Reaper aesthetic, and her weapons are really cool! The moonlight atmosphere and and the music! Oh god! Philistine is one of my favorite songs in any game ever. Not only is it emotionally and tonally fitting, but it's, well, Travis puts it best.
Catchy as hell.
The lyrics perfectly call out Travis and his desperate struggle for revenge that is destroying his humanity, and perfectly sets up Travis's inner struggles he goes through during the final act. Also, it just slaps! I don't have a lot to complain about this fight, and that's saying a lot in a series chock full of memorable ones. Bosses that would have easily made this list if Margaret wasn't a contender, with her standout gameplay, aesthetic, and music. Rock on, Margaret. You truly are so sublime. On a favorite boss list like these, people always tend to sing the praises of the great Jubileus, and that's for good reason. I definitely prefer Bayonetta 2 over 1, and while they both have their fair share of incredible, over-the-top boss battles, if you compare their final boss battles, there really isn't a contest. You know the drill. Throughout your encounters over the course of the game, as you're laying the finishing blow on the angelic bosses, they all bless your journey, praying that the creator, Jubileus, watch over you on your quest, really giving the feeling that Jubileus is simply this omnipotent, godlike entity watching you in the background, something even these monstrous monstrosities worship. Well, omnipotent, yes. Background, not so much, as we learn that the big bad's ultimate plan is to resurrect the slumbering god, by using a giant statue as a vessel, using himself and Bayonetta as catalysts for the ritual, and then launching the statue into space on a rocket so the direct sunlight can allow the ritual to take place. Now, if all that sounded insane, well, A, welcome to Bayonetta, and B, you might want to strap in. Bayo's friend Jean gives chase by riding her motorcycle up the rocket while it's taking off, and then dodging all manner of attacks during an incredible chase sequence. After ditching the bike and continuing the chase on foot, pause, she reaches Bayonetta and frees her from the statue's eyes. But sunlight hits, and even with just one eye of the world, Jubileus is resurrected, and even in its complete form, it's no less of a god to be feared. I love the design of this thing. Flashy, imposing, and awe-inspiring. The creator of all. And that incredible hair. It's here that the boss fight starts in earnest, taking place in this really cool spherical battle arena in space, dodging the hair strikes in order to attack the face weak points on each. The arena then shifts to various different landscapes where you have to dodge environmental hazards to reach the faces and do more damage. So much fun, and captures a perfect blend of Bayo 1's superb combat and movement. After navigating through every environment, you can begin to damage Jubileus herself, and you can see the remnants of the statue-like body start to crumble. Now, returning to the sphere in space, the god starts to take this seriously, and starts attacking personally. Her opening attack is to send a flurry of galaxies chasing after you, and then after a series of literal godlike punches, opens a black hole, attempting to pull you in and deal heavy damage. This is all so much fun, being in control of one of the best hack-and-slash characters ever, taking on her definitive, formidable opponent. But now, it's time for the climax. Knocking Jubileus back, the iconic Wicked Weave comes out as you run along a pyre of hair to get in close and rip apart what's left of the crumbling god's face. But it wouldn't be a Bayonetta boss without an over-the-top finishing move, and oh boy, here we go! The finishing move to end all finishing moves. Using Wicked Weave's, Bayonetta summons her version of a Jubileus-like creature, except this one's shimmering with a black coating and gray streaks. Oh, and it's also 1,000 times bigger than the god of creation. As you know what, fuck it, just watch. Right, so apparently this battle took place at the edge of the solar system, and now you control Jubileus, steering her as she is launched past every planet in order to get her to end up into the sun, finally destroying her, as Bayonetta lands on the remains of Jubileus, ending the game. Just kidding, lol, John is still alive, and apparently the debris from Jubileus is on a collision course with Earth that will destroy it if they don't destroy the large pieces first. Under a timer, you and John team up to destroy the pieces as you all hurtle through space, finally ending the game as they return to Earth. There's also another fake out later where Bayo's not actually dead, but really this is the end and that's the final boss of Bayonetta 1. Hoo boy! It's become the memorable boss to end all memorable bosses, and I think, you know, objectively, outside of like personal preferences that edge this one out, this takes number one. It's got everything. Spectacle, engaging combat and level design, great music, big build-up and even bigger payoff, and just a dash of subversion for good measure. It's no wonder it's become a benchmark for boss battles, and I can't help but agree with that sentiment. If you haven't played Bayonetta 1, just think, as you're loving every second during your first playthrough, know that they are truly saving the best for last. One of the best parts of creating these lists is it doesn't just allow me to talk about some of my favorites in whatever subject I'm talking about, but it gives me the chance to rediscover overarching tastes and preferences. Patterns and trends start to emerge, and I end up having a bit more understanding of the kinds of things I enjoy and make me happy. This has been especially apparent for this topic, where I was a bit hesitant in picking it. Did I have enough to talk about? Would I be passionate enough about the subject? And thanks to rediscovery and reflection, I think I'd say so. To move back to the topic at hand though, I've learned that I do have a deep appreciation for immensely challenging boss battles that probably destroy you at first, but it's quick and easy to hop right back in to try again, slowly chipping away at progress while mastering your own abilities in this situation, and completely understanding your opponents inside and out. So much so that once you finally do beat that boss, you feel like you could beat them again a dozen times in a row. I've also found that some of the best examples of this type of boss are found in the Metroidvania genre. And one of the best examples in that genre is a little game called Hollow Knight. I'm unfortunately only privy at the moment to discuss a brief slice of this adventure, but you should know that this game is a masterpiece, every element fine-tuned to near Metroidvania perfection, and one of the most memorable aspects of that perfection is Hollow Knight's boss battles. There are so many to mention, and we do have to just pick one, but in general they all exemplify that required mastery of your own abilities and studying of your opponent I mentioned earlier. They are all uniquely incredible, and one of the coolest features of Hollow Knight is the inclusion of the Dream Nail, where you can slash certain defeated bosses and enter their mental dream state, where you fight an enhanced, more powerful iteration of that boss, and these are always an exhilarating challenge to take on. Now, with the stage set, let's get to the main performance. The boss that we will be discussing, and my personal favorite boss of all time, is not actually in the Hollow Knight base game, but rather in a free content expansion, the Grimm Troupe. The titular troupe is introduced as a traveling circus group with some dark mystery under the surface. Their leader, Grimm, asks you to aid in a ritual of theirs. We learn that the troop is enslaved by the nightmare's heart and requires a ritual to be performed in service to it. Gathering nightmare flames from around the map to grow a Grimm child, a replacement for the current Nightmare King, which must be slain in order to be reincarnated within the new Grimm child. You start gathering more and more flames, each tougher to obtain than the last. Halfway through, Grimm tests your abilities in a theatrical performance, and it's a great boss in its own right, putting on a fine show and a fine prologue for what's to come. After the nightmare flames have all been snuffed out, we're left with a choice. If we talk to an NPC named Brum, we can take steps to destroy the Grimm troop's lantern and banish the troop for good. This removes the Grimm Child charm from your inventory and replaces it with another, though we would miss out on this list's final entry. If instead we return to the troop, we find a sleeping Grimm. With all the flames defeated, he is ready for the final ritual to begin. Whip out the Dream Nail and enter the lair of the Nightmare Heart, the eldritch entity imprisoning the troop. Walk through the ambient, gloomy hallway until the heart and its surroundings reveal itself, and out from the nest appears the one, the only. What follows is my favorite boss fight of all time, an insane gauntlet of everything that makes Hollow Knight great. So many unique attacks that put your ability to adapt and react to the test. And even just re-researching this fight brought so many patterns and adjustments flooding back to my memory. The dash uppercut, the flame Grimmchild spread, the needle dive dash, the pufferfish. I also haven't really mentioned this yet, but I love Grimm's design. The vampiric bug with so many flashy and standout attacks, bringing out the best of Hollow Knight's character design and art style, at least for my specific tastes. Back to the fight. It's really good. And really hard. But that's the glory of Hollow Knight. Every battle you get closer, and every time you die, it's so easy to get back up and enter the fray once more. Not to mention, this is a fight that no matter what, will likely be fought near the end of the game, so you have had plenty of time creating a build for your character that fits your playstyle. A true test of everything you have been able to master about both the Knight's simple combat, but deep customization. As mentioned previously, a sign of a great Metroidvania boss is one that is immensely challenging, but one that you can slowly chip away until by the end, you feel like you could beat it again a dozen times more. This fight truly runs the entire spectrum of that mentality. He feels impossible, even with your potentially maxed out character, but you grind. You start learning how to dodge attacks that seemed undodgeable, and you start landing in hits everywhere you can. And best of all, no matter what's happening, you're dodging, you're attacking, you're getting hit, you're dying. Hollow Knight has this strange way of always keeping it fun. I remember my first time running through this boss. It was a weekend night, probably about 1 AM at this point. I had been playing against Grimm for probably close to 2 hours. And what started as impossible felt possible. Better even, feasible. I'm going to beat this boss. As I learned, I adapted, I strung everything I had mastered about this game until finally... And all I could think afterward was, that was the greatest boss I had ever fought. The ritual complete, Grimm is resurrected as a little puppet ability charm that's fun to use, a little reminder of our duel. Sometimes it's hard to make lists like this without sounding a bit repetitive. There's only so many times you can say, "This boss fun," before it gets annoying. But I hope I can convey some semblance as to why I think that, especially with this entry. Grimm displays the perfect blend of all those sentiments, an incredible and memorable design and backstory, a fantastic fight itself, bringing to the forefront everything that makes its game a masterpiece, both in its glorious presentation and music, and its superb game design. I knew that in order to top this list, hell, to beat out the other magnificent boss fights in one of my favorite games, Hollow Knight, they would have to be something very, very special. And, well, that's exactly what Team Cherry gave us. My favorite boss battle, Nightmare King Grimm.